and welcome. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Introductions, my name is Jason Toth. I'm the Associate Vice President here at the University of Toledo. I want to welcome you here to the SSOE Seminar Room in Nitschke Hall here on the University of Toledo campus. And I want to welcome those of you that are joining us via the live stream on the web. Today is a celebration of sorts for us on the master planning team. We've been putting an awful lot of work in over the last 18 months, and we're very thankful for our partners, Smith Group, JJR, and all the support that they provided us along with all of their sub-consultants. It's been a great experience. We've got to talk to a lot of individuals in our community, on our faculty and staff, our students, our administration. It's been a great eye-opening experience for me, having been at the university now for approximately 6 years. It's been a great experience to get to know people, know how they work, how they function, and to allow me the experience to know how I can position our physical plant to meet the needs of the university as we move forward. So it's with great excitement that we get here tonight. We're not at the finish line. We still have some work to do, but we look to present what we're referring to as our draft master plan. So we've collected a tremendous amount of data. We've scrubbed through that data. We've synthesized that data. We've pulled at it. We've tugged at it. We've talked to our deans. We've talked to folks to get an idea of where it is that we look to go. And in previous presentations, we've thrown out different ideas, some really out there ideas, some very conservative ideas. So now we're to the point where we think we have a really good idea of where we look to head over the next 10 years, over the next decade as the University of Toledo moves forward. And that's what we're here to present and talk to you about tonight. So we have a great deal of information that we look to present to you. We have a lot of information, so what I would like to ask is if we could hold our questions until the end of the presentation so that we can get through all of the material that's being presented today. There'll be time at the end, and we'll answer all of your questions to the best of our ability. But if you could just give us the time to get through the presentation, we greatly appreciate that. I'm going to make some introductions before I step aside here. With me today, gentleman here in the second row, is Dan Klett. Dan is our Director of Campus Planning and Design. Dan's been here at the university for 14 plus years. He's an architect by trade, brings a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge and experience, and he's been a great asset for this team as we've gone forward in this planning exercise. Next, I want to introduce Doug Kozma with Smith Group JJR and his colleague, John Hoffman. Both of these gentlemen are very experienced, very knowledgeable, and they've been a great asset, and I feel like we've developed a strong relationship, friendship, and a partnership through this exercise. The three of us, Doug, John, and I, will be leading the majority of the presentation today. We'll kind of go back and forth to be able to answer your questions, to be able to present our ideas and explain to you how we've arrived at where we have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Doug, and we'll get the evening started. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Jason. It has been a great privilege to be on campus over these many, many months. We have a lot of material for you this evening, but we wanted to start and reiterate the words that Jason used. This is a great day for the University of Toledo. We're privileged and pleased to present to you a series of really powerful ideas tonight. There's a lot of content here that I'm not going to attempt to read this to you, nor is Jason or John as we migrate through this, but you've got a fantastic leadership team in place. You've had a tremendous change, positive in the last several months. We're really trying to channel that energy as we look to the future, not only for the community and the campus, but of course for the state of Ohio. This is a wonderful and great thing. So this evening we have organized for your benefit content really in 3 substantive chapters, of which we will be migrating through this content with time at the end to talk with you about thoughts and ideas you have about this draft master plan. So we want to begin this evening's storyline with a little bit of philosophy and tone regarding what is a master plan and why are we doing it. I want to reiterate and emphasize a couple of important points, and that's really why we're here tonight. And it's a strategic alignment of things. It's your strategy for the academic and research futures. It's alignment of physicality of place, and it's putting all these things together. In a nutshell, that is really the purpose of your master plan. The other words that are on the screen that are worth reiterating, you will hear Jason and John and I use these words over and over again tonight. It is a flexible framework for change. It's a guide plate. Should the university choose to grow and change, these are opportunities in which for that change to occur. There is a theme that runs through this evening as well. It has to do with fiscal responsibility, practicality, and implementability. So at the end of this evening's discussion, we'll talk about opportunities to actually get us to the finish line through a phased, incremented way. We have two foundational points that are important to begin this evening's conversation with. The first of which, of course, we hope for those of you that are faculty and staff and students that you've seen this and understand the importance of your mission statement. There are some big and powerful words in here that inspired our team to think broadly about your future. So I want to make sure that you have a chance to at least read the importance of some of these things. Community-centric, community-focused students. We're talking about greatness in liberal arts education and sciences. These are themes that permeate through our planning. And we came to the conclusion as a team, including the president and her senior leadership team, that this plan needs to be guided by a series of principles. And I want to take a few minutes and articulate why these are important. On the right, or excuse me, on the left, you'll see 5 major categories of themes for your principles. They are important because we made decisions and made value judgments based on these principles. They have everything to do with efficiency, sustainability of purpose and place, making sure that the students' needs are met, that the faculty's needs are met, that the experience of the place and the campus and student life in the future will be different. And of course, engaging the fabric of the campus and the community. These are all pillars of the plan. As we begin to articulate the principles here, we want to reinforce the idea that these are things that are embedded in the physicality of place and some of the actions that we're going to be talking about this evening. So a little bit of data as a background point for your master plan. We worked very carefully with the president, her team, and the administration and leadership to talk about what is the future of the University of Toledo in terms of enrollment. The graphic that's in front of you this evening shows sort of a longitudinal analysis of where you've been in terms of enrollment. And I'd like to draw your attention to the vertical bars on the left-hand side. Those articulate past enrollment trajectories. The dotted line in the center is where we are today. And as you can see, the next decade of growth is projecting a 1% annual growth rate. And I'm pleased to say when Jason and team started this planning exercise about 18 months ago, we have now substantively actually achieved our 1% growth in the last 18 months. So a point of pride for the University of Toledo. As we look to the future, I want to just make sure I explain the colors so that there's clarity on what that means. The top line represents enrollment at the Health Sciences campus. That is projected to be a stable enrollment over the course of the next decade. That thin line, I believe that's orange, is online and distance learners. That is also projected to be a consistent, perhaps somewhat upticked enrollment trajectory. And of course, the bottom is this main campus that we're on this evening. So all told, you can see the top right indicates a trajectory of just under 23,000 students. The reason I'm spending so much time on this is this drives a lot of the conversation that Jason mentioned at the beginning. The facilities response is based on numbers of faculty, numbers of students, et cetera. So this becomes an underpinning of your plan. We also took a deep dive looking at what is the future of each of the colleges at the University of Toledo, both at the top on the main campus and at the bottom on the health science campus. A couple of things to note. The text on the left describes it, but I think it's easier to see in the graphic. There's a couple of things that are differentially growing. Each of your deans and the provost have articulated and discussed this at length. Points of pride are all of the schools, but you'll note that engineering, business and innovation, U College, natural science and mathematics, over the next decade, as a point of pride, have an opportunity to have some significant growth. And we'd like to share with you how we might address that in the future. We'll also be talking about some of the other schools in this evening's conversation. The first several months of this planning exercise was admittedly a little data focused and perhaps a little dry for those of you that just want answers. But it was really important for our team to do a really cross-disciplinary dive into what are all of the different facets of the University of Toledo. And I'd like to draw your attention to the top graphics and what they mean, because both Jason and John this evening will be talking about the implications of those. And I'd like to start with the graphic in the upper left here, the utilization analysis. The team at large conducted something that was very important, and what we did was we used 3 measurables to try and figure out how we're using space at the University of Toledo. The first of which was called utilization, and it's measured in like we look at this crowd tonight, how many seats do we have? How full are the seats during the section of class? And how many hours a week are we filling a space like this? We looked at that. We created a heat map for all the different teaching and learning spaces on the campus. It taught us a lot. Jason and Dan will articulate what those things mean. In the middle, we also looked at the health of all of the physical assets of the campus. Through the help of Jason's team and others, we indexed the buildings on a scale of 1 to 100. To cut to the chase, red is bad, blue is good. You can see there's a gradation of opportunities for change and where we spend money in the future. And then finally on the right, there's something called an adequacy evaluation, which is if we were faculty members, it would evaluate how easy is it for me to teach and communicate in a space. If we were students, it would evaluate how easy is it for us to learn in that space. So it talks about lighting, environmental conditions, technology richness, et cetera. And et cetera, you can see there's sort of a heat map that's been developed for each of these different analytic pieces. It really became the underpinning of the foundation of the plan, and we'll articulate what that all means. All the things at the bottom, by the way, were all the other physical analytics that went into the plan. Some of those may come out tonight, but they were all very important. Okay. In summary, before we actually talk about what the recommendations are, this is a global view of what the next decade might look like in terms of opportunities for spatial change. And I want to start on the left and work my way to the right. A couple of headlines. You have a lot of office and classroom space. We will articulate this evening an opportunity to consolidate and make those spaces more efficient. We also want to rebalance and repurpose some of the instructional laboratory spaces on campus. That'll come out as a theme tonight. In the middle, regarding student housing and the student experience, we're very much so interested in exploring what are the opportunities for introducing apartment units on campus and rebalancing traditional and suites on campus. In the middle, talking about the opportunity for more opportunities for student recreation, both indoor and out, hopefully with the idea of a dedicated rec complex. We're very excited about that. We'll share that with you in just a minute. And then on the upper right, talking about the opportunity to consolidate your competitive athletics programs and use the parking assets better in the future. So as an underpinning to this, Jason, we want to start talking about how important it was to reach out to the people. The president empowered us to talked often, talk frequently, engage people, make the process as transparent as we possibly could. And with that, we're pleased to begin sharing with you some of the recommendations of this evening's draft master plan.
So here we go. Doug got the boring part. I get the more exciting part. So as we've talked about, we want to start looking at the plans and start getting an understanding of where we want to go. We made some assumptions at the beginning of the plan of thinking about where it is that we're trying to go and what it is that we're trying to do. And as many of you know, the governor created a task force on affordability and efficiency in higher education. So that's been a driving force for us to think about how we do business. Earlier slides talked about our enrollment. And I can tell you and tell this group, and I've said it many times during the course of our presentations, that at our highest level of enrollment, up at 24,000 students, we had significantly less square footage than we have today. Right? So that starts to put together some ideas that maybe we're not using our space the way we should be, and maybe we can think about it differently. So that's been a driving force for us. And some of the other ideas that the president has talked about in her leadership, looking at the growth of funded research and a priority put on that. So we want to talk about that a little bit more as we move forward. So the first topic I'd like to talk about is Scott Park. As folks know, we own the Scott Park campus. We've owned it for a long, long time. It's had different identities over the course of time. And in today's situation where we're at today, we are not currently teaching classes to college level students. We are partnered with TPS, so we do have high school students that are taking college classes, but we're not having any of our direct college students take classes there. We have back of office functions that exist over there, and there's some inefficiencies and some costs associated with that. So one of the drives of this plan is looking at the idea of consolidating some of the things that we do that exist on the Scott Park campus and moving them over and migrating to the main campus. So those functions can join their colleagues and work together to provide some efficiency in how they operate, to provide better support for folks around the campus, interact with folks in finance, with HR, with internal audit, those functions that exist there. We also talk about our athletic program, and there'll be more discussion on that, but we have 3 varsity athletics that exist at Scott Park. Our soccer program and our men's and women's, our baseball and softball programs exist on that campus. We think there's tremendous value if we were to bring those sports back to the main campus and integrate those into our student life activities that exist on the campus today. And we know that we have a very large parking asset that exists over there. Our live-on, first-year live-on students and now our 2-year live-on students, that's where they need to park their vehicles while they're on campus. So we know that that's an asset that we need to recreate somewhere else if we're going to start to migrate activities away from Scott Park. We also have a large storage facility that we've been migrating out of over the years that we'd like to look at differently. So what we're saying in this is that we look to move the university away from Scott Park, not necessarily get rid of Scott Park. That's not what we're saying, and I want to make sure that that's very clear, because we've talked to our partners at TPS, we've talked to our partners at Northwest State and Terra. We intend to have them partners with us, and we have assured them that they have a place to function, and we will figure out the details as we go forward. But what we're more focused on is what the University of Toledo is doing and how we're functioning as an entity, and making sure that our core mission is being met. And currently today we're a little bit distributed, and we're trying to go to a consolidated model that will have some efficiencies for us. So this is one of the major topics that we wanted to start off with, just to kind of put that out on where we're looking when it comes to the Scott Park asset. So what we started to do is, as we gathered information over these 18 months, we've rallied around 4 major themes. And we'll get into some detailed discussion, but the 4 major themes are highlighted here. We have the repositioning of the academic core, investing in research, consolidation of athletics, and enhancing student life. So as we go and migrate through the presentation, we'll highlight each of these sections and talk more in detail about what that means and what that looks like. So first we're going to start with the idea or the thoughts around repositioning of our academic core. We know that our physical assets need to align with the mission and vision of the institution. We need to make sure that we have the appropriate facilities that are going to support our faculty, staff, and students to provide that top-notch education to move our students on into their future careers. So as Doug had mentioned earlier, utilization of our space is critical. We have data, and we've talked to a lot of folks, and it's not uncommon in higher education that we're not very efficient users of our space. It's not uncommon for us to have many of our classrooms that sit open a great number of hours throughout the week, or we have classrooms that could seat 50 and we have 22 students in them. So the better we can align those assets and those numbers together, the more efficient we can be. And in tight financial times, it gives us ability to maybe think about downsizing our footprint. And if we downsize our footprint, the amount of capital investment will go further. So we've had an approach that there's about 8 million square foot that the University of Toledo owns and operates. And so the capital investment has to be spread across about that entire 8 million square feet that we own. If we're able to downsize that footprint, the dollars that we have to invest will go further, right? So we look at the utilization and working with our provost and working with our president and working with our faculty. We want to see if there's ways that we can drive up the usage of our rooms and our spaces. Look at more centralized scheduling so that our registrar can control rooms and make sure that they're being utilized to the maximum. Now, that's not to say that there won't be departmentally controlled spaces, because we understand that our colleges do need some departmentally controlled spaces, and we've had a lot of discussion with those groups. So it's not to say that all departmental control will go away, but maybe there's a little more robust centralized scheduling that will occur that will allow that efficiency to grow. Teaching is our priority, so we need to make sure that we have classrooms that will support that. And as many of you in this room can probably attest to, there's some very successful, great classrooms on our campus, and there's some others that aren't so great. We need to provide some balance there and create adequate spaces that will allow our faculty to educate those students in a quality environment. We know that will lead to success. One of the major things that we're thinking about is U-Hall, our iconic structure. We know that U-Hall will be a building that we look to maintain and operate and have on our campus for many, many years to come. But the reality is that facility was built a long time ago. It has some physical constraints that don't necessarily align with teaching pedagogies as we move forward. So we're looking at opportunities to potentially reduce the amount of classroom space slightly in that building for other uses. So when we think about migrating activities from Scott Park, we need to provide office space for a lot of the functions that exist over at Scott Park. We have a lot of office space and administrative space that exists in U-Hall, in finance. Finance is one of the groups that exists over on the Scott Park campus. So there's an opportunity for us to think about repurposing some of the underutilized space within the University Hall building to bring finance groups together to work more efficiently. So what you'll see, and this is the first one that you'll see here, is we've started to get a blow-up of maps to identify the spaces on our campus that we look to have impact on as we go forward. So the buildings that are highlighted in this purple lavender shade are the buildings that we look to have impacted over the course of this 10-year plan. And there'll be a varying level of impact in those buildings. I would point out the building that exists. Does it have a laser pointer on it? Thank you. I would point out this building, for example. This is Snyder Memorial. We've done a great deal of work in Snyder Memorial over the last 6 to 8 years that I've been around the university. But there's a little bit more work that needs to happen in that facility in our classrooms to augment and make sure that those are adequate classrooms. So even though these are all colored in the same color, there's varying levels of work that would take place in these different facilities. One of the things that I would highlight on this drawing or this map before we go by is a concept that the President has helped us out with quite a bit, and it's talking about branding and creating signature spaces on our campus. One of the things that we hear often from our students is the lack of branding, the lack of a true feel. You know, we know that we celebrate our collegiate Gothic architecture, but oftentimes there's other spaces on campus that really lack some of that feel and that devotion. So we're looking at an opportunity here. We've created a tremendous amount of green space on our campus as we've demolished buildings over the course of time. But what you'll note, and some of our students I think would attest to this, is we kind of have sidewalks to nowhere. They used to go to old buildings that sat there, and we've patched in and kind of made them connect, but the space really doesn't have a feel. And we look at the opportunity to create a real asset to build off of our celebrated Centennial Mall, somewhat of an extension of a green space and a place that we can really celebrate and enjoy on our campus. With that, I'll turn it over to John.
So Doug had mentioned that this master plan and the recommendations are based on the analysis and the data that we had generated at the beginning. And so you saw these maps before, and he described them pretty quickly. I just want to make this connection between what this analysis means and our recommendations related to it. So what's up on the screen is 2 different ways of looking at classrooms. On the left-hand side is how are we using our classrooms? What's the number of hours that we have people in classes ongoing in each one, an average for each building. And on the right-hand side is this academic adequacy. So what's the extent of the flexibility of the furniture, of light and air, of technology? And you'll notice in red, which I highlighted in red on both maps, are those buildings that we are using very well. Lots of students are going through each one of these buildings. We're using those classrooms on average better than we are across the university. Yet, as noted on the right-hand side, they are relatively poor classrooms. And the furniture that's in there, the way it's laid out, light and air. And so what we're indicating is that we need to put our money and we focus our money on where our students are being taught and really focus in on those that really need the best amount of investment. And so those red ones you'll see are those buildings where we're recommending that we really take our limited classroom investment dollars and concentrate those in those buildings. So we also talked about how we want to increase utilization. And what does that mean? Part of it means that we are looking at it in 3 different ways. In the first way is how often do we have classes going on in each classroom? And so we looked at University of Toledo in the number of weekly room hours, the number of hours per week that an average that classroom has, and on average, it's about 28 weekly room hours. Now there's a building that that is the workhorse, and that's Memorial Fieldhouse, which is really the best classroom building that is on campus, meaning the number of the types of classes that occur there, the equipment, the furniture. It's really one of the newest classroom buildings, is really one of the best ones. And the weekly room hours is higher, of course, because everyone wants to be in those spaces. Students want to teach there, students want to learn there, professors want to teach there. What we're recommending, though, is that we need to look and to use our spaces even more intensely than we are now. And we've set a new target for the weekly room hours, which is related closer to an average of the guidelines that are across the United States for how often classrooms should be scheduled. So that means perhaps longer days, perhaps some classes, more classes occurring on Fridays. We also looked at it from a second, which is student station occupancy percentage, and so that's from the number of chairs that we have, how many are actually being used on average. And you'll see that it's on average right now it's about 60, but Memorial Fieldhouse, of course, is doing even better with about 64. We're proposing and recommending that through better scheduling, as Jason had just mentioned, that we'll be able to match the number of students and the number of chairs that are located in each across as we're scheduling those classrooms. We'll be able to do that better through more centralized scheduling. The third one is goes in the opposite direction, in that we're also looked at how many square feet are there per student. And so this is a lecture hall, and so there's a relatively low number of square feet per student. But what we're looking at is not only how are we teaching classes in the past and how are we doing it now, but how are students, what are the emerging ways that students are being taught in classrooms? And right now there's lots of flexibility. There's lots of ways of moving chairs, and so that during a class we can learn in multiple different ways, from peer to peer, from student to peer, flipped classrooms, which requires on average a bit more space than we have. And so what we're recommending is that right now there's about 21 square feet per student, but as we start looking at renovating classrooms, as we discussed, that we really need to think about expanding the amount of space per student, and so that we have those active classrooms. So what are those active classrooms? This is an example where we have, it's a very technology-rich environment, that we have equipment that's able to be flexible, and so however the instructor wants to teach on that day, that it can change from class to class or in the middle of the class. And so we are recommending, as Jason had mentioned, the 6 buildings that are on the left-hand side, all buildings in and around our academic core, Centennial Mall, to really focus our limited classroom investment dollars in these 6 buildings to bring those classrooms up to speed, and so that they are as popular and as in demand as the Memorial Fieldhouse classrooms are.
I got a little bit ahead of myself earlier, and I actually had spoken to this topic a little bit more in detail, so I won't spend a lot of time here, but this is where we talked about University Hall and the potential to reposition this asset going forward. But I'll jump ahead to some other areas that we want to think about, and these are 2 major buildings on our campus that support a lot of our student activities and student life. And we look to continue to invest in our library. We did a tremendous renovation last summer, and we're proud to say that we're going to be starting another one here over the winter break that will last through the year and through the summer to renovate the 1st and 2nd floors of the library. And there'll be a little bit more work yet to go, but we know that the library is a hub of activity that occurs on our campus. It's social activity, it's studying, it's support, and it's a major asset, so we want to make sure that we align it correctly. And the other is our Thompson Student Union. It is the hub of student life, and we know that our student union is lacking. There's some things that are not attractive in our student union. We feel very strongly that we can transform our student union into something different without tearing it down. We've had many success stories, and I would point to the Carlson Library. I would point to what we did in the Memorial Fieldhouse. We feel very strongly that we can change the appearance of that asset and make it a very strong asset going forward in supporting our students in the activity of student life. So again, we wanted to start to put some visual slides together that could start to get people thinking about what things could look like. And this is that opportunity where we talked about the open green space on our campus, adjacent to the Bowmanati Wolf Hall, the Memorial Fieldhouse, and Carlson Library and the Student Union. This really gives it a true identity. It provides flat, open green space for casual recreation, good traffic flow pattern for pedestrians to get back and forth, and really creates a signature space that we're lacking in that quadrant of campus that we think will offer tremendous value. So let's switch topics. Let's go on to our next bucket, and this is investing in research. We know that our president, since her arrival, has talked very much about investment in research and growing our funded research enterprise. So there's things that we need to do to support that activity in happening. So we're looking at some opportunities. We're looking at the opportunity to potentially create a new multidisciplinary research facility. We'll talk a little bit more about that in detail. We're already moving forward with renovations of labs on our health science campus. We have a project that will be starting here in a couple weeks, and we have another project in the design phase, a state-funded project that we're excited about. And then we look at our engineering facilities here on this campus and needing to support what today is our largest college and continues to grow. So as we think about this, when we look at our map, some highlights here. This is our existing North Engineering building that exists, and the graphic doesn't show it as well, but in this area there's actually what we refer to as a high bay space. It's a space that largely is underutilized. It's got a lot of storage. It's got a wind tunnel in there, but it's lacked some branding and some opportunity. Some of that has been cost-driven, that we haven't had dollars to invest, and we're looking at an opportunity to take that space and to transform it into something different. So what you don't see here today, or what you don't see in this slide, is what exists here today is a building by the name of Palmer Hall. And this was a facility that we inherited, was not a purpose-built classroom facility. It's inefficient for our usage, and we're looking at an opportunity of taking that high bay space at North Engineering, and similar to what we did in the Memorial Fieldhouse, to create 2 stories within that structure so that we can offload the activities that exist in Palmer Hall into the North Engineering building and allow us to take Palmer Hall down. That will create a tremendous green space, an academic quad, so to speak, that would mimic Centennial Mall and the green space on the other campus on our engineering campus, create a tremendous gateway as you come into the campus. We've already created some green space here in the past with having demolished what was affectionately known as the old pickle factory. So we took that down, and we look at really creating an identity that's really been lacking on our engineering campus for a long period of time. The other building that I would point out here is this is the opportunity to construct a new facility, a multidisciplinary research facility. So as we look to grow our research mission, we have a few options. We know that we can look for increased efficiency and productivity out of our private investigators, our PIs as they call them, and we expect to do that. And the provost and our VP of research, Frank Calzanetti, looks to do that. But as we continue to grow, we're going to need more lab space, more research lab space on our campus. So what we've looked at is an opportunity to create a multidisciplinary facility that could be utilized by all of our colleges. This could be a facility that has dry and wet lab space, that it has office and collaboration space, has computer lab space. And what this allows us to do is put people into one facility, which is very efficient use of the space. As you become a funded researcher, you may escalate up to have more space in there, that it's assigned by peninsula in the lab space or by room. As you roll off of having funded research and a colleague becomes funded, they roll in, you roll out. So it's a space that can be utilized and make sure that it's very robust all of the time. We also have the opportunity to have shared equipment use. So we have multiple research facilities around our campus, and many of those research facilities have the same type of instrumentation or equipment that exists. And that's something that we have to maintain at every single one of those locations, even though it may not be used all that much. If we're able to house people in the same facility, we have the opportunity to have a limited investment, and again, through that shared usage, could be expending less capital, but still meeting the needs of our research entities. So this is where we talk about all of that. Again, I get ahead of myself because I kind of get lost in talk that I forget about the graphics that we have behind us. But this starts to talk about all of the colleges that we look to have in there. So this isn't just an engineering building. It isn't just a natural science and mathematics building. We look at being able to support all of the activities in all of our colleges. And there is the opportunity that bringing those people together could lead to greater advances in research. Just that interaction of higher ed colleagues, that chance interaction that leads to other developments or other partnerships in research that could have tremendous growth and tremendous advancement of the institution. And this may be what it would look like someday. Again, you notice that it creates a much different feel when you enter our engineering campus than what it is today, and really gives it a brand and an identity that aligns with other places on the campus. So we'll move to the idea behind the consolidation of athletics. As we talked about, we have 3 varsity athletic events or sports that exist on the Scott Park campus, and this is the idea about bringing those people back to this campus. And again, we recognize that it definitely provides an efficiency for the athletics program to be able to use shared training facilities and support facilities on this campus, but we also think about a tremendous value for our students. Give them the opportunity to, after class, go to a soccer match or go to a baseball or softball game. The attendance is very low at our Scott Park campus, and part of that has to do with the distance away from the main campus and the lack of transit shuttles to get us back and forth. So this is an opportunity to do something different. So when we think about this, we have a really nice opportunity. We have an existing track that exists today outside of the Fetterman Training Center. Along this side of the Fetterman Training Center, there's actually built-in bleachers into this. So in this concept, what we are thinking about is putting our soccer field, our women's varsity soccer field within the track, and allowing them to compete in that venue. We look at the possibility of that being a synthetic turf field, which would allow a greater ability to play. It potentially also looks at a way that athletics may have an opportunity that they can rent that facility for other uses, maybe a revenue stream to help pay for that investment that we have. It could also be a potential for recreational sports to occur on that field, being that it's a synthetic turf field and you don't have the wear and tear on grass, that it could be a shared use that would not only support the varsity athletics, but support the community potentially and students as a whole. Great thing about this is that the women's soccer team already often uses the indoor training facility within Fetterman. You've got our weight room facilities and our athletic training facilities that exist in here. So there's an opportunity that we can create locker room space and office space for the coaching staff, create this hub of activity when it comes to soccer. Then we move on to thinking about we need space for baseball and softball. And we look at this land asset that we have today. Where this is at currently is that this is what's referred to as Carter Field, which is a large open grass field. And in this location is where Carter East and West, 2 dormitory facilities sit that have been closed for a few years here on our campus. So we're looking at the opportunity to create a baseball softball complex that has shared amenities. So down the center spine would be shared office support space, training space, locker room space, batting cage, all those types of things, with bleacher venues, concessions, all that stuff in a back-to-back model. Creating a sense of place, so we've strategically aligned it directly with Stadium Drive so that it really creates a branding capability, an ideal space that as you approach, you've really created something rather than kind of stuffed it into a corner. Got plenty of parking assets around to support the activity that would take place. And even with putting those facilities there, we still are able to maintain, and it's important that we're able to maintain, 2 full football grass fields that can be shared use, similar to what they are today, for football practice, for band practice, and for recreational activities. One last piece is that if the soccer field becomes a synthetic turf field, we cannot throw the javelin, the hammer, the disc on that synthetic turf. We would destroy the turf, so we need to create another location. So we've created a throwing area for those activities to occur remotely from the track. Some would say that that seems strange that you would do that away from the track, but that's actually very common for track and field venues, that those throwing events happen at a location, satellite location to the track. So we have that figured into the plan. And again, you start to look at a map of what this could potentially look like and branding the campus differently and creating some different flow around the campus. So our last topic, and there's much to talk about, is probably one of the key topics is the enhancement of student life, because that's what we're here for, right? We're all here for students. If it weren't for our students, there certainly wouldn't be a reason for me to be here and a lot of others. So we need to talk about it, the enhancement of that student life and supporting all the activities, not only in the classroom but outside the classroom, because there's an entire life that goes on with our students that are here. So we know that as our enrollment grows, we're going to have to think about housing on our campus. We've moved to a 2-year live-on requirement. There is request as you move to a 2-year live-on requirement for a different style of living, an apartment-style living, which we don't currently offer on our campus. So we need to think about that and how we're going to answer that. There's multiple ways to do that. We know that we have many assets on our campus, Res Life facilities, that need work, and we've already identified it, and we're moving forward with a major renovation to Parks Tower. We're going to close that facility entirely next year and do a $10 to $12 million renovation of that facility. That's a robust facility with 700 beds on our campus. So we've identified it. Again, that's the beauty of master planning, is that it gives us a guide. We identified this early, working with the Res Life folks, that this was important, and we're moving forward. We're not going to sit back and wait for another 2 years to say, yeah, that's a good idea. We've recognized and we said, let's go. So that's what we're going to do. Working with our Greek village, we have a strong Greek population. We are limited by the amount of space that we have on our campus, and they look to grow. And we're looking at opportunities to do that, to support that. Our Greek community, they're great givers and donators to the university. They're fabulous students. And so if there's an opportunity here, then we want to explore that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then, as Doug mentioned earlier, we have what we think is a very unique idea for a dedicated recreation complex along the Dorr Street corridor. So we'll look at this a little bit. I won't spend a lot of time on these two topics, Parks Tower and McComas Village, Greek expansion, because we kind of talked about it, but this is an opportunity this is where the village exists today. There's actually 7 buildings. You don't see the 7th building because in this concept, we've taken one building out to create a different flow pattern and then created the opportunity for additional facilities to be built around this location on our campus. This is the Dorr and Secor intersection. And this is our current gateway project, so that our Barnes & Noble exists at this corner now. This blue building here is looking at the second phase of the gateway project. And so this was when the gateway building was built, there was always the envisionment of when the market drove it to be the opportunity for another phase. So we look at the idea of the potential for a mixed-use retail on the lower level and apartment-style living in the rest of this facility to have retail activities that occur on campus for our students, whether we have another restaurant or a beer and wing joint, as we like to call it, things for our students to do, but also having maybe additional apartment-style living right on campus to support students and activity that's going on. And as I mentioned, these are all these topics, and again, I apologize because I'm kind of rambling and I'm getting ahead of myself with these beautiful slides that Doug took so much time to put together for me, and I'm ignoring. So the last portion that I want to address when we talk about this enhancement area is, first I'll move to this quadrant here. This is a property that the university has owned for a good deal of time. This is the old Bettinger greenhouse property. It currently is just a green space asset. We look at, when we talk about Scott Park and potentially migrating parking off of there, we need to create an asset somewhere else to support the parking activities. So this is an opportunity for us to create a parking asset that is slightly remote from campus, but it is close. It is walkable from campus. It is definitely closer than Scott Park today to create a parking asset to support that. And then we have the idea of a dedicated recreation complex. So this is along the Dorr Street spine between Byrne and Secor. So this is green space that exists today. It's property that the foundation has acquired over the course of time. And we look at the opportunity to have 4 dedicated recreation fields that would be illuminated to expand the playability times of what occurs down here, and to create a new public safety building and a recreation support. So there would be bathroom facilities, storage facilities for rec activities that are going on, along with parking assets, because we know we have a large commuter base. We have a large commuter support in our intramural sports, and we need to provide a place for them to come and go to get to this recreation complex.
Have to give your vocal cords a break, Jason. You've been working over here. We're just about complete with the presentation. Jason's done a marvelous job migrating through the content. As you've seen the cadence of this, there's been a series of ideas expressed, articulated, recommendations put forth, and then sort of a vision. This is the fourth in the series of a vision that would articulate, to the President's point, let's be a part of the community. Let's engage with the city. Let's make a commitment to Dorr Street. And so as Jason articulated, what's in the foreground here is a point of pride for the University of Toledo. This would be the first opportunity in the history of the institution to actually have a dedicated space for rec sports, as Jason mentioned, with the opportunity to do club sports on there. So again, another amenity for the campus and for the community. The last part of this evening's presentation, we want to, Jason, maximize our time for conversation. We wanted to migrate through the health science footprint and then the opportunities for phasing.
So we've talked a lot about the main campus, right? And I know that there's a lot of our folks here today that are very interested in the health science campus, as are we. This plan fully expects that the health science campus will be an asset of the University of Toledo. We're not divesting ourselves from it. We're not moving away from it as part of our plan. But we're also, as a physical master plan, we cannot get ahead of our colleagues in the College of Medicine and Life Sciences and our clinical folks with the operations that are going on. We're sitting in the background waiting for them to come to clear direction on what we look to do, how we look to operate. And it's not, again, the physical footprint is not going to dictate how those operations exist in the future. So we don't have a lot to say. We have a lot of ideas. We've had a lot of discussion. There's opportunities as we migrate in different directions that we could do, but we don't have anything further to say, unfortunately, on that topic, given where we're at today. And that's just a matter of where things exist today with those agreements, or not those agreements, but with the affiliation agreement as it gets sorted out with the clinical enterprise, determining how they're positioning themselves in the ever-changing world of healthcare. So with that, we want to move to the next part of the agenda where we talk about sequencing and phasing and thinking about how this project, this 10-year project moves forward. As Doug had mentioned, we know that there's financial constraints. We were hopeful that over the last 18 months we would have found a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow and that money would not be an issue, but unfortunately that's not the case. And even if it was, we still need to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars. So we need to think about that. We would argue that this is the best time to do master planning, to provide us with a guide as to how the money will be spent that we can all look back to and say that this was well thought out, as opposed to potentially just a different group making decisions here and there. This will provide us that guide that we can think back to. You know, we've got to be able to be very flexible in our planning as we go forward with what we do. We have to be able to toggle back and forth. There may be a phased implementation that occurs over the course of time because of the financial constraints of the institution. So what we've done is we've broken this plan into 2 5-year segments. We call phase 1 and phase 2. It's a 0 to 5 year plan and a 6 to 10 year plan. And what we'll start to talk about a little bit here is the activities that would occur in these different areas of the plan. So as you work down the left-hand side, and again, as Doug mentioned earlier, I'm not going to read off every single one of these, but these are the groups of opportunities that we look to have in that first 5 years. And you can see at the bottom of the slide, we talk about approximately a $40 million spend in that first 5 years. And I'll talk a little bit more about that financing here in a little bit. As part of this plan, you'll see that there's donor and partnership opportunities. We're working very closely with the community around us. Goddard Field is one of those things that we're working on with the Old Orchard Neighborhood Association. They've done a fantastic job of creating some renderings and some ideas on how to brand that space. That's another space that we've had for a long period of time, and it's really gone without anything happening, and with a lot of speculation of what it might become. Now we have some clear direction. We looked at to make that a joint use shared recreation facility that both the community of Old Orchard and the University of Toledo can utilize. And there's an opportunity for us to partner with them to think about that. Gateway Phase 2 is another project working with our foundation. that we have to think about some of these projects. Again, when we talk about the financial strategies of what's going on, these donor partnership opportunities are potential ways that activities in and around campus are funded, but they're what we would call off-balance sheet. So they're activities that take place that provide amenities, but they're not hitting the bottom line of the university. So a foundation-led project for Gateway is one of those opportunities. McComas Village is another opportunity that whether it's through a partnership with a developer or if it's with a ground lease with the different fraternities or sororities where they have the ability to build a building on our campus, is a way to provide those amenities without, again, having that impact on our bottom line. And as we've talked about, as we look about efficient use and downsizing our footprint, we talk about removal of facilities. And in this first 5 years, we think there's a strong likelihood in the ability for us to migrate out of the Westwood storage facility. That may not seem like much, but that's a 270+ thousand square foot facility. So if we were to taper that off, and it's in very poor condition and needs a significant amount of deferred maintenance liability. So that simple line item creates a tremendous amount of opportunity for us. So you start to look at a map of what that looks like in that first 5 years, and again, starts to show the buildings and the impact of what's happening on our campus during that first 5 years. So let's fast forward then to the second 5. And again, you have a list of opportunities that we have on here in that second 5-year period with approximately a $60 million spend, so 40 and 60, we got a $100 million spend. Again, some opportunities for partnerships to bring money to the table off balance sheet from the university, and again, some removal candidates. So the $100 million spend, I want to talk a little bit about that so that people understand what we're talking about. And I'll bring this map up so that you can absorb a little bit of this is that next phase. So in pink are the buildings that would have been impacted during the first 5 years, and then in purple is what's been impacted during that second 5-year period. That $100 million spend is made up of 2 major funding sources. One is approximately $80 million of state biennium funds. On average, every 2 years through the state appropriation, we receive around $20 to $22 million. And so $80 million of the 100 is made up from that. We've purposely taken some of that money away because we know there's going to be deferred maintenance items that are not within the master plan that need to happen. There's going to be things that break that need to be fixed, and we're going to have to use that money for. The remaining $20 million, we looked at another bond issue over the course of this 10-year life that our CFO has looked at the financial situation of the institution. We know that we're going to be paying down debt, and as the future goes forward, there'll be an opportunity for us to borrow some more money. So this overall plan, I can tell you, is more than $100 million spend. So it's those partnerships, those donor opportunities, philanthropic opportunities that are going to help balance this entire equation for it to come together and come to fruition. So next steps with where we're at before we move on to Q&A. Here's where we're at. We're in December, right? So we've presented to you our ideas on the draft master plan of where we look to head. We look to get your reactions and understand where we may have some things that we need to massage or think about doing differently. We look to, during the month of January, to finalize that plan and really crystallize it to where we think we're all in agreement, where the president's office, the provost's office, and the rest of us are all in agreement that we're ready to go forward, and then take it to our board of trustees for approval in February, and that this would be signed off as that this is the guiding light, this is the plan for us to go forward as a university over the next decade.
We mentioned there's been a lot of input that we received throughout the master planning process, a lot of those in meetings just like we're having tonight, kind of one-on-one discussions. We've also got a lot of input online. We've had this interactive website, the website address being up at the top, where there's lots of further information that users can look at, and also a chance to kind of sign up for email alerts of meetings happening. Quick show of hands. How many of you are on that email list and keep getting emails from me? Yes, great. Thank you for coming out. I'm the guy on the other end. So so on this interactive website, we'll have this presentation. Will be posted tomorrow morning. And then we hope by the end of the week, we're going to have a digital workshop of the draft master plan. We'll be able to delve into all of the graphics that you've seen, a bit more information, description of what the recommendations are. So look for that at the end of the week. UToledomasterplan.org.
This can also be reached by going through the University of Toledo website. There's links on our website. If you go into the universityutoledo.edu and you type campus master plan into the search engine, it will take you to a UT master planning website, and it has a link that will take you to this page. Or if you go to the facilities and construction website because you want to learn all about me, that's another opportunity for you to get to this website. So with that, I think we're ready for questions. We have a microphone that will travel around the room so that we can capture your question for the live stream, and we'll enter into conversation with all of you to get your input on how we've done. So if you have a question, if you want to raise a hand, my colleague Dan will venture your way.
Thank you very much. As I follow the presentation, then absolutely nothing happens to Rocket Hall?
I wouldn't say that nothing happens to Rocket Hall. Many of our buildings are not mentioned in here. We know that Rocket Hall and many other buildings are going to have continued investment if they're going to stay. I would say that we don't have a strategic change in function of Rocket Hall, but there's activities that exist. We're going to have to continue to support those activities so that they can continue. But a transformation or a repositioning of that facility has not been thought about or put into this 10-year plan and vision.
There was no mention made of Driscoll Center. Do you have any plans to do anything with Driscoll Center and the adjacent parking?
At this point in time, Driscoll would fall into the same category as Rocket Hall. It's not a strategic change. Now, I will tell you that our foundation exists in that building, and if the foundation has different ideas about what they look to do, we would work with them, and that would be outside of the master plan, given that the foundation is a separate entity. But in our discussions with them, there has not been talked about a strategic change to Driscoll and how it functions today, or a change to the parking asset that exists there today as well.
Just an observation. I was a little surprised at the limited increase in 8 years of online. I mean, online is one way to say it, but using technology, if you will, to limit use of classrooms. And I guess the other thing I would say in that regard is, and again, this is a strategic planning question, not a facility planning question, although it relates, and that is that, you know, the opportunity to collaborate with other universities, which I know you don't have a handle on right now, but reality is Bowling Green is 10 miles away, owns community college, and with technology and limited state assets, it just seems to me at some point that really needs to become part of the plan.
Thank you for the question. It's an excellent point. We worked very carefully with institutional research, and we've been able to isolate those current online learners that do not participate physically in the life of the campus, meaning they never, ever, ever set foot on a University of Toledo asset. So that line that you were looking at is a projection of what that cohort of students might look like in the future. The blended, the dual enrollment, to your point, those folks that may be taking a class with Owens or any of the other 2 or 4 year neighbors that do come to this campus and have a footprint, park cars, come for food, that we have actually factored into the top end enrollment that Jason talked about. So I guess from the perspective of capturing that, it is a both and. So that's a positive for your student and a positive for the university and the fabric. So have we answered your question? It's a very good point.
Well, Tom, what I would add to that, and we didn't do a good job of explaining that, is that we have looked at and we do intend that when we talk about the adequacy and the technology that exists in our classrooms, and our president orated this very well in one of our conversations earlier this week, is that we look at opportunities to create classroom space that can be broadcast. So it could be that a French 4 class is taught to 30 students on the University of Toledo campus, but also broadcast to Bowling Green with another 25 students at that location. So we are thinking about that with that partnership and that opportunity as our presidents are working very closely together, and that includes Northwest State, Terra, Bowling Green, University of Toledo. Thank you.
I just had a question about the labs, in one of the slides it said that you were going to do some new lab that would be all-inclusive. Then why are we remodeling the labs on the health science campus if that's the plan?
So we have a tremendous amount of lab need, right? And it's not all going to occur in one space. So the lab space that exists on the health science campus, we're looking to invest in that because we have a tremendous amount of research that exists on the health science campus and will continue to exist there. So what we're looking at is on the main campus creating additional facilities because we don't have the availability of additional lab space on this campus like we do. There's a lot of vacant lab space currently. And the reason it's vacant on the health science campus, I will tell you, is because it's not very adequate. So we're looking to support that lab space on that campus currently and then build new facilities on this campus with the opportunity that multiple different colleges of researchers can be working in one space. That's the concept.
Three very brief questions connected. You showed a graph that showed what happened between now, or a statement between now and Board of Trustees. And one says a finalization, I think it was in January. Will there be another public meeting, or how will these people that are here today know what's different from what you're presenting now?
Well, the opportunity to get your feedback is today and also through the website, and that's why we really want to promote the website to get your feedback through the website. At this point in time, we're not looking to do another forum of this nature before going to the Board of Trustees, but there will be opportunities that we look to communicate to the community where we're going. I envision after we meet with our Board of Trustees and get their approval that we will have a similar type forum that we will present what the plan looks like after it's been crystallized.
But online, before it goes to the Board of Trustees, we won't necessarily know if you made any changes or not.
That's the intent at this point in time, that we'll communicate through the website. There is opportunity for us to put information back out as we receive questions and opportunities. So we look to interact, and that's why we set up the website the way that it is, so that it's not just all information coming in or pushing out. It's the opportunity for us to go back and forth. So we look to utilize that tool as we have over the past 18 months to communicate things back and forth. So I think there is and will be an opportunity, and I think it's a very good question that, in all honesty, we hadn't probably thought through far enough, and so I appreciate and applaud your question, that we'll think a little bit more about that between now and then for the opportunity to communicate where we're headed.
And not knowing how the Board of Trustees would work with the strategic plan, do they accept this in totality, reject it in totality, or can they pick and choose?
We've been working closely with the board and with the president over the course of time, that we envision that it will be a fully accepted plan as opposed to picking apart pieces and parts,
Okay.
And that it would be a plan that would be, say that we agree with this plan going forward. And part of that, the beauty of this is that, as Doug mentioned, it's very, very flexible. So there's nothing in this plan that's an edict. So there's nothing in here that says we have to do this or we have to do that. There's opportunities, and it's a guide for us to work from. It's not a set of instructions that says we have to go that way. So that gives the board a lot of flexibility, that they can approve the plan, but there may be things that we don't enact on or don't move forward with that were talked about during the course of the plan for any number of reasons, whether that's financial, strategic, any number of reasons.
Thank you.
Hi. So I'm wondering why there is more of a push to renovate McComas Village as opposed to adding more houses for it, since there's 5 unrepresented Greek organizations on campus?
So, and I'm not sure if you had just walked in or maybe I didn't say it well enough. Actually, when you look at this slide, this shows the expansion of the Greek Village. So the houses that are in blue are the opportunity for new houses to increase the size of the McComas Village. We've talked very closely with the Greek population and the leaders of all the Greek organizations. We agree that there's strong sentiment for an expansion of the village, and so we provided that in the plan. An investment in the existing facilities to make sure that they continue to function, but then also providing spaces on the campus for growth of the McComas Village and the Greek population. Does that answer your question?
It just seemed like in the slides that you showed that was what you were hoping would happen if donors contributed to that, not necessarily a guarantee.
This initiative is not a donor-led. This is actually a partnership opportunity with the Greeks. So many of our fraternities have housing corporations that allow them to enter into what's called a land lease, where they can purchase land from the university and build their own house. And many of our fraternities are very interested in doing that. They would like to have a house that they own. So that's an opportunity. And if you move those folks out of some of these buildings, this allows others that don't have that financial capability to be able to move into some of these facilities. We also have a few sororities. Not as many sororities have housing cores that can do that. It's more on the fraternity side that could do that. So it's not a donor-led, but it's an opportunity for a different avenue to move us forward.
It doesn't seem very clear. Non-motorized alternative transportation to the campus, specifically the Chessie Circle Trail, seems to be omitted from the map, and the use of the railroad corridor from main campus to Scott Park seems to be omitted from the map. Is that just because that's a fine detail, or?
It's a very good point. We didn't speak to it. So the Chessie Circle Trail is not eliminated. Actually, you would see on here the connectivity of the bike path. So the University of Toledo, through the partnership with the Metro Parks and other entities, own this corridor for extension of the bike path. And that's what you see, this faint line that actually traverses through here is the extension of that bike path, which would tie into the University Trail that heads this way. The connection to the health science campus is a little bit further off, and so that's not shown in this plan because the city and other entities don't envision that happening within this decade for that connection to happen.
The connection to Scott Park is also off?
It's not off, but again, that's another one of the long-term directions of other entities. We own a portion that I've shown here. We don't own the rest of the portion, so working with all those other entities, that's not currently figured that it's going to happen within this next 10-year time frame.
I'm a student of University of Toledo. I wanted to ask about is there any effort to have enhanced collaboration between University of Michigan, which is one of the closest big university that we have, and University of Toledo on a more sustained level? I'm a student of engineering, and at least in my 3 to 4 years, I've not seen the huge amount of collaboration at research level between University of Michigan and UT. Could the multidisciplinary program building that's supposed to come up, could that be a stepping stone in this direction? Have we thought, or does it need to be like more sustained, like coming from the top rather than,
I think there's an opportunity with the multidisciplinary research facility, but us in master planning and facilities are not the lead when it comes to collaboration between the University of Michigan or other institutions on an academic level. I would direct you to the provost's office and the dean to have some of those discussions. We're unable to speak to where those are at or where those discussions may be. But I will say that I think that the multidisciplinary research facility could potentially be a location where something like that could occur.
Okay.
When it comes to the Bominati renovation, are there plans to renovate the actual laboratories within the building or just the classrooms? Because the laboratories are subpar compared to other university laboratories.
It would be both. So there would be a focus on both the teaching labs and the classrooms within that facility to support all the activities that occur in natural science and mathematics within Bominati and Wolf. So it's a large building. We've had pocketed renovations, and I think we've had some success stories, but there's a long way for us yet to go.
So in between where Carter and the Glass Bowl is, a lot of people from Parks and McComas rely on that parking lot throughout the weekends when they bring their cars back from Scott Park. And a lot of the times we had issues with parking when those parking lots were closed for games or activities going on. And a lot of the times I would park my car behind where Carter Hall is. And now that I see that you're kind of taking that out and putting in fields, do you have any alternative parking spots for when those parking lots are closed?
There's definitely a balance of parking that we need to figure out in detail as we go forward. So you're exactly correct that in this map, there's a parking asset that exists here today that is no longer shown. There is the opportunity, and currently we show this as grass, and we've left it that way intentionally, but there are pockets of locations on campus. So this is where our transportation center exists today. The transportation center moves into this new public safety building. This is an opportunity to recreate the parking asset that sits here in this location. But right now we've shown it as an asset for green. space on our campus for recreational sports, for just incidental things, if we think differently about parking going on. But parking is a major issue that we need to make sure that we're answering that need for our students, faculty, and staff, and visitors.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could review over like what you plan on really doing with Scott Park. Like, what have you floated around idea-wise, since you're eliminating the UT as an asset there, technically?
Yeah, well, what I can tell you that we've done is we've really looked at, again, from that affordability and efficiency standpoint, is pulling back the activities that the University of Toledo does on that campus, positioning ourselves for a number of opportunities, whether that's to increase tenants within that space, to look at a different business model. We're not at a point that we have a clear direction or that we're ready to talk about where that goes, but we're really focused on the idea that finance being separated from a lot of its counterparts becomes problematic, and being separated from the rest of the activity of the university is problematic. HR in the same realm, internal audit in the same realm, that we think there's a better model. If we can bring those things back together, it will be a stronger setup for the institution. Then it puts us in a position that we can think holistically about Scott Park. We can have really somewhat of a very large availability of space to think about how we would strategically work with our partners that are there for potential growth, or look at other avenues on how we would use Scott Park. But we're just not there at that point to say this is the identity of Scott Park once we migrate in this direction.
Well, have you ever thought about maybe bringing like fire and EMS and police, since the Scott Park police station's right there, which is subpar, and that'd be like kind of bringing in the city's assets with fire and EMS and law enforcement?
Yeah, Toledo Fire and Rescue actually do lease space. They have teaching space on that campus, and that's something that we would definitely get into discussion with and think about. And I appreciate you bringing that up, and that's something that we'll think about as a master planning team about opportunities.
Getting back to the health science campus, I work on the health science campus. I'm a physical therapist, so I've been following this closely for 18 months. But still, Jason, as far as you and the planning developers, everybody have found not going to do anything with the health science campus at all, even though it requires a lot of renovation?
No, we're not saying we're not going to do anything with it. We're continuing to support the asset. What we are saying is that from a strategy-wise behind if there's changes in healthcare and how we're delivering healthcare, we're waiting for Dan Barbie and Chris Cooper and others to help us understand where that migration may go. As the affiliation agreement crystallizes and formulates, we're waiting for them to tell us how we can support them. We know that there's an investment that needs to be made, and we're going to continue to do that. That's why we're moving forward with the renovations to the labs that are on that campus. That's why we're moving forward with repairs that my team is already working on today and will continue to work on with replacing air handling units and pumps and electrical switchgear. So it's an asset that we're going to continue to maintain, but we're waiting for direction from our counterparts for the strategic nature of where we need to position ourselves for the next 10 years. So that's what we're saying.
Okay, so just waiting on ProMedica to tell us what they want to do. I thought between the lines I was.
No,
maybe not even between the lines.
And I don't think that's what I'm saying, and that's not what I think the approach is. But I appreciate your commentary.
Okay.
So you said there was going to be $100 million investment, correct?
This plan is a larger than $100 million plan.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that we have a $100 investment on balance sheet from the University of Toledo through state biennium capital and bond financing. Donor opportunities, partnership opportunities would make this plan to come to fruition, because it is a larger than $100 million plan that we've presented today.
Okay, now when you were talking about the health campus, where would that money come from when Dan Barbie or whoever comes back? Will we have to go back and then get more bonds? How will that work?
No, we've built some flexibility in the plan, so the $100 million is not completely spent. There's opportunities for us to have flexibility in that spend on where we're going. And so, again, we have some ideas of where we may go and where we may end. There's a lot of academic operations that exist on that campus, so the idea of improving our classroom space, we talked about the main campus, but we think about the facilities and the academics that occur on that campus need to have investment too. So the money that's talked about here has opportunity. So where we've talked about a lot of these buildings, there's also the opportunity that we would do that there, and that would come from that same funding source. So we're not saying that just because we haven't presented it doesn't mean that we won't be spending money on the health science campus and those entities, or that we have to create a new revenue stream.
Will you come back in a public forum to tell us how that's going to work, or are we supposed to just, how will we find out that information?
We will work very closely with Dr. Cooper, Dan Barbie, and others on that presentation. It won't be led by the facilities group, but we will work with our counterparts to make sure that that presentation is communicated on the directionality.
So will it be on the website? Will there be any public involvement?
Again, I can't speak to that because we will not lead that presentation. We will be a part of it, but we will pass that information back and communicate the concerns or the questions that have been raised to that leadership to make sure that that communication is given.
I mean, because that's a valuable resource,
We
that
agree.
facility. I mean,
We agree, and the planning that we have is that, and what I stated from the beginning is that this 10-year plan envisions that the health science campus will remain a robust campus that is owned and operated by the University of Toledo.
Where you have the proposed recreation area between Secor and Byrne, I was under the impression that that land was owned by the foundation. Has that been transferred to the university?
No, it is not, but this is a comprehensive plan, so we've worked very closely with the foundation. We've worked and had conversations. So in this model, it could be transferred back to the university and we could move forward, or that could be a foundation-led project that exists on that campus. So there's flexibility in that. But you are correct that that is a foundation-owned asset currently.
My question doesn't speak directly to the master plan, but it does speak to the access, external access to and from the main campus. Right now, Secor Road is a designated pathway to get from the expressway to the university. And I read recently in the Blade that there's still some talk about a Dorr Street interchange. Have you talked about any of that at all? Because it's a serious problem external to your campus. Traffic is.
Yeah, a couple of things, I guess, when we talk about that. There are multiple access to our campus. There's the interchange off of Douglas, and as you talked about, the signed entrances off of Secor. We are aware, working with the City of Toledo, that there is discussion of improvement of the Secor corridor between Central Avenue and Bancroft, and we're hopeful that would occur. There's a lot of hurdles for them to get through that, but we know that section and corridor is the narrowest possible, 9-foot lanes, dual lanes, and it's kind of a death trap, if so to speak. You kind of at your own risk going up and down that corridor. We're hopeful that expansion of that road goes through. It would create a tremendous corridor leading to our campus, so we're hopeful on that. Speaking of
Excuse
the
me,
yes.
Jason,
Yes.
but there's quite a few challenges to overcome with the Secor expansion. It's a residential neighborhood on both sides of Secor. What's wrong with the Dorr Street interchange, and why wouldn't the university support such a thing?
Our president has backed away, and the university as a whole has backed away from supporting of the interchange, and that was discussed many, many months ago.
Why did they back away, please?
I can't speak to that. That was not a decision that was made by my department, so that's a question that unfortunately I cannot answer. We are looking at opportunities to celebrate that corridor as we've done. We've had much success working with the city to improve this corridor. We're looking at positive impact with this recreation to create that daylight coming in, which is closer to our campus. The further distant, that's outside of the purview, and it's outside of our control as a master planning to talk about or influencing or forcing that interchange to occur. And again, we're not the decision makers when it comes to that. Appreciate your comments, though.
With the combination of Scott Park moving things like HR benefits and payroll and stuff like that into U-Haul, how are we going to compensate for the parking with that? Because that's already congested, the east parking ramp, that area. Are there opportunities where you can expand parking somewhere? What are your ideas?
Yeah, as I mentioned, and we haven't crystallized the parking, but we know that as we make these migrations to different locations, we're going to have to strategically address that. And if we're influencing or increasing the amount of folks in certain areas, we're going to have to react to that. So we don't have that crystallized here. We know that that's one of those outstanding items that we're going to really have to get in the weeds and think about where we're putting people on our campus, where they migrate to, and how that impacts what we do from a parking perspective. Very good question.
So, Jason, I realize you can't speak much in regards to Health Science Campus and the affiliation. I think the question is, you know, in regards to that asset, is the hospital going to be part of that asset? That's the question. And I think, if I may offer a suggestion, I would ask Dr. Gaber and folks of senior leadership to have a forum there on Health Science Campus to listen to the concerns of the staff and the community.
No, and Randy, I appreciate that, and I understand. As I said from the beginning, it's not the position of me as a master planner for the physical plant to dictate or say where the hospital is going or where anything else is leading to. So we'll take your information or your question back, and I think it's understandable that people want to know, and we get that, but it's not our position as part of this planning to you know, announce or say or dictate what's going on there.
I mean, that's why you're seeing the questions, right?
Understood.
There's not been much communication.
We understood. So understood, and we'll take that back. Thank you.
Just a quick question again. We didn't hear anything about the offsetting of conventional sources of energy with green sources of energy. Do we have any targets, numbers, or is it even a part of this master plan here for the University of Toledo?
We are strong in sustainability and green energy. We have our solar field on the Scott Park campus. We have wind turbines. We have geothermal. So everything that we do in facilities is thinking about cost reduction and alternative energy. We do not have in this plan the idea of an expansion of a solar field or expansion there, but some of those details with alternative energies may be worked out as we go along. It's outside of the master plan, so the Director of Energy Management reports up through my shop, and we work on utilities and how we're doing things in the future and looking at how we secure utilities and thinking about alternative energy sources or providers are something that we evaluate as we go forward. And I can tell you that we're very proud of what we've done in terms of sustainability efforts. There's a long way to go. We won't argue that, but we think compared to many of our counterparts that we've done a good job. We've done a tremendous amount. We celebrate the fact that even though that our square footage has increased year after year, our utility spend has gone down year after year, and we control it very well, and we're going to continue to look to do that.
Two questions. Has anything been talked about with the child care facility or the old child care facility, or how to repurpose that?
There's opportunities with the child care center for a number of different things, but we have not crystallized as to what that will become in the future. We do own that facility outright. We recently, I guess, finalized the lease agreement with the Tomahawk, who was the developer when we built it, so it is a University of Toledo asset that we can position how we look to. I can tell you that many folks have inquired, different colleges have inquired, private sector has inquired about that asset, but we do not have a clear direction. We highlight it in purple because we envision that something is going to happen there, but as of today, as of this meeting, we don't have a clear direction on what that asset will look like.
And the second thing is, I've really appreciated the amount of opportunities you've given people to have their voice heard in this process. So as we move forward and you're starting to get more into the weeds and seeds and the details, what's going to be the process moving forward to make sure that voices are heard on more of the detailed level that really affect a lot of individuals here?
So compared to the discussion that we'll have going forward with specific projects, we've had very limited conversation. If we start to think about things that happen in the union, there'll be a much more robust conversation, because then we'll start to get into specifics of thinking about this room or this space. How does it function differently? So we need to interact with our students, with Flap and his colleagues in the student union and yourself to say, how does this function? So there will be detailed user group and forums and those types of things to really come to a definition of a specific project of what it's going to look like to come to fruition. It's real easy to put boxes on the board, but what actually happens inside those boxes is going to take a detailed amount of conversation. And we've worked with some folks, maybe in this room, maybe not in this room, that I think can attest, and maybe Dr. Lawrence can attest with his experience, that we have a lot of interaction with user groups during a design process before we go out to bid for a project and actually construct buildings, so that we get that input, because we are a support entity. I'm not looking to build facilities that don't function well for the end users. So we want to make sure that we're getting that information up front so that we can build to the best of our ability within the cost constraints that we have, functional facilities that will last the test of time.
You mentioned that you were going to make some renovations to the student union. Could you tell us what specifically you're going to change about it?
So that's one of those details that we would have to get into. So we have ideas, but we have not flushed all those out with the users to say what is the most priority. I could tell you personally, the switchback ramp area is an unattractive space that I think we could do something very different within that space to liven up the facilities. We're working with Aramark. We know that they're going to be putting an investment into the dining facility within that area. They're already working on the Steak and Shake that will open in that facility here in the spring. They're also going to improve the dining facilities that are occurring in there, and there's also future expansion. But I think we need to talk to the students and understand what it is that you guys are looking for before I can say this is what we're going to do. We need to have those detailed discussions to understand what is working, what isn't working. We know that the facility is very tired. It's very dark. It's not as appealing. So we know that there's simple things that we can do to kind of liven it up. But from a functionality standpoint, we really need to sit down and have those conversations and understand better before we can move forward. We've just recognized that we need to do something to move it forward. Now it's time for us to get into that detail to say what, as we think about phased approaches, what do we do first, and how is it going to have the greatest impact for our students?
So going off
I
of
love
what-
the fact that the students are speaking up. This is fantastic. This is great. It's about you, so take the opportunity.
So when you said like you want to talk to the students, like are you gonna like make like kind of something like this, but just for students? Like are you gonna allow us to?
And this is where I'll pick on you guys a little bit and my good friend Cameron over here, because I hosted a forum that nobody showed up for, and I worked with student government to plan the forum. I provided pizza, I provided pop, and nobody showed up for the doggone thing. So I want to integrate with you. I want to talk to you, and any opportunity we can, we'll work with Cameron, we'll work with Amal, we'll work with others to get your input, to have forums, host them at the student union, host them wherever you tell me you'll come. We'll come and sit down and talk.
All right, I'll let you know where.
Not at my house, though, because it's a small house. I got 5 kids. There's not enough room.
So first and foremost, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunities to work with student government on this plan, and we look forward to it in the future. To kind of address what was just mentioned, with a lot of the things that were happening this semester and the vast craziness that was this semester academically and as far as everyone's personal lives, we weren't able to advertise it as well as possible, but I will attest to their very true interest in getting student input. My question deals with Douglas Road. If you look east of Savage Arena, there's a sidewalk running across it. Are you proposing there be a pedestrian bridge there?
You are a smart cat, Cameron, I tell you what. So yes, we've talked about it for a number of years, about the idea of a pedestrian bridge that would get our students across Douglas. And so that is what's shown in this document or in this drawing, is the opportunity within this next 10 years to create that bridge. We already know the cow path exists. The students have told us where to put the bridge, so we appreciate all your efforts. We don't have to spot it. We know where to put it. And so there is an opportunity, and we look to move forward with that as a course of this plan. And thank you for your commentary to support us on working with student government. So thank you.
This is just going off of all the things about parking. Have there ever been thoughts of expanding the parking garages vertically?
There has been discussion. I will tell you that our parking garages are not structurally sound for that expansion. So as most of you probably know, we had a major structural failure of the east garage a couple of years ago that we had to shut it down and do emergency repairs to it. We actually did the same thing to the west garage as well. And over the past 2 summers, we've closed those garages down to do structural repairs to make sure that those assets will be alive for the next 10 to 15 years, but they have a shelf life. We expect that outside, so it's not presented in this plan, because we hope to get 15 years out of these parking garages, that we're going to need to have new parking structures that will be built on our campus to support activities that are going on. So again, it's not shown here because it's outside of the window, but we're very aware of the condition of those garages. And unfortunately, because of their structural nature, we don't have the ability to increase the height of the decks. We'd have to actually start over and build new. There may be opportunities to reuse the caissons that exist underneath those foundations, though. So we'll definitely look at that as a cost savings measure if there's an opportunity.
I just have a question on, with all of this expansion, is this going to add jobs to the city? And as you lease land, do you also lease the staff so they're no longer state workers versus privatizing the workforce?
First off, I would say there isn't a tremendous amount of expansion. There's actually a reduction in our footprint, first and foremost. When we think about these operations or expansion of the village, this isn't an operational. So if you think about the Greeks building a house, it wouldn't employ a staff, so to speak. I think there's opportunities. Again, we'll have to, it's a good question that you have. Some of it will depend on which side of the sheet it falls on. So if it's a foundation-led, there's opportunities to go in one way. If it's university-led, there's opportunities to go for another way. So we think that impacting the community, that this has a great potential to do some impact that would be great in this area, because we know that this area of the corridor of Dorr Street doesn't have a lot of great amenities going on right now. We've got a couple of fast food places and some bars down here, and really some tired assets. What we're hopeful of is that as a leader, the university's investment in this area and creating a public safety that will increase the safety and security of this area, that our private sector partners will look at this as an opportunity to expand their footprint and to provide resources to our students, our faculty and staff. Then this could have a very positive impact that would create jobs in the area and bring people in if we start to create different, very functional, thriving businesses in this area.
Jason, well, first of all, I think it's an incredibly thoughtful vision. I applaud the whole team. But I think at the very beginning, you said that one of the guiding principles, I believe, was to celebrate the river. I guess, could the consultant team talk to that idea about some of your thoughts about that?
Good point.
This has been a fantastic evening for me because I haven't done the talking that I would normally do. Jason's done an exceptional job. The river is an important asset, and we didn't get to all of the details of it in the interest of tonight's time, but there's 2 things going on. We have met with the Beautification Committee numerous times and listened to...
And the River Commission.
And the River Commission, thank you. Exceptionally good ideas that are embedded in the plan, and I think some of our colleagues are here tonight. So 2 things are happening. One is, if you look sort of laterally along the river, we're envisioning, as Jason articulated, on the sort of north of the Ottawa River side, right, on the Centennial Mall side, a little more deliberate investment over the next decade in actually sort of a pedestrian promenade, contrasted with the area south of the Ottawa River, which is envisioned as something that is a much more informal. It is in the floodplain and the floodway, tall trees, places for students to recreate, that type of amenity asset in the future. So there's both and happening on the core of the river. We have also explored what it means to connect. One of your colleagues in the audience asked about connectivity for the parks and trails that go through campus. It is obviously envisioned that would all be connected. By the way, I want to just address the Ottawa River. I know Jason's looking at his watch. There are very few campuses in America that have that level of asset. It's one of the things we can't miss in the next decade is to reinvest in the Ottawa River. And I want to make sure that gets said because it's a really important component of this campus.
Well, with that, I want to say thank you to all of you for coming out. This is a great turnout. My only comment against you all I wish you all would have came out to every single forum that we had. This would have been fantastic. But really, I should have brought more pizza. Exactly. We really appreciate and value your input. We've talked about this through the entire plan. we're being transparent, we're being collaborative, we're looking for your input. Nothing would please me more than to build facilities and have people rally around this plan and be excited about it and supportive of it. I'm here as a support mechanism, right? I'm not building stuff for myself. I'm building stuff to support our faculty, staff, and students. And so the more input we can get from you to help drive and align the mission and vision together, the better. I encourage you very wholeheartedly to go to the website, review the information. We've presented a tremendous amount of information. I'm sure you'll look at it again and have more questions or wonder what's going on. And there's things that you asked very, very good questions, so you're an intelligent audience, because things that we didn't bring up, you picked up and you brought up, and I appreciate that. It helped us to bring those out. As you see other stuff, use the website, give us the information, give us your feedback, because again, this isn't about us. This is about all of us as a community. This is about the UT community, the adjoining community in the city of Toledo, to be a support mechanism for economy and for everything that we're doing here. So thank you very much for your time and your patience with us, and have a great evening and safe travels home.